Hello, BookTube. Very sorry for the fading, weak winter light here. Doesn't seem to be any other kind of light on offer today, anyway. And today is Wednesday, which is New Comic Book Day. Traditionally, a time when, for at least the last decade, new comic books came out in America, and you could go and stand there and read a bunch of stuff you weren't intending to buy, and maybe buy a few things. Once upon a time, I lived for New Comic Book Day when I was in the country. When I wasn't traveling, I used to buy new comics all the time. Uh, and Wednesday has been the location for Epic Comic Book Wednesday, a world's finest collaboration between myself and Michael K. Vaughan. Michael K. Vaughan is out of the picture for the moment, for the time being. He's temporarily absented from BookTube. But I didn't want the tradition of talking about comic books on Wednesdays to just go away completely. We don't have our great collaboration today. But I did, in a very rare turn of events, actually make it to the comic shop today. My LCS, my local comic shop, is in Newbury Comics, actually on Newbury Street in Boston. And I managed to make it there this morning. And I, like with so many other places where I go, I mainly go just to say hi. I know Adam, my guy there, is a wonderful customer service, wonderful person, funny, friendly, knowledgeable. When I'm in the area, I like to swing by, even if I'm not giving him any business. But it felt right to go to the comic section and see if there was anything to buy, especially since there was one thing I had in mind today. One thing that I looked up online and thought, if it's true, then it looks a little too good to just get on Comixology. One of the things that one of the death knells to local comic shops, as if they weren't already in struggling times, is something called Comixology, which Amazon bought. So it's part of your Amazon package, where you look up the latest issue of some comic book that you're thinking about, even remotely thinking about. You can just one click on that comic book for a digital version that goes to your Comixology account. So you one click, and a fraction of a second later, that full color comic book is on your Kindle. It's on your iPad. Nevertheless, I went into the shop today to see what was there. I realized that I have not yet given Adam a long shopping list of things that I want for the new year. So I will develop that shopping list and see what he can do. But I found two things. So we can talk about comics a little today, and it won't be, the great reprints or the subject matter studies that Michael and I do. That's going to have to wait. But we can still talk about two issues. One is brand new, and one came out a little while ago. And they both, in their way, reflect back on what I just said, which is that I used to go to New Comic Book Day, whether it was Wednesday or Friday. I used to go to New Comic Book Day every week religiously when I was in the country. There were all sorts of things that I always wanted to get. There were all sorts of things that I was sometimes eager for. If some comic was in the middle of a really good run, I would be eager to get that latest issue in that run. And the reason why I'm resolutely using the past tense on all of that is because that all ended. That all absolutely ended. And it didn't end for natural reasons. It ended for badly unnatural reasons. Marvel Comics, and then later DC Comics, became absolutely cockroach-style infested with far-left political ideologues from the Twitter sphere. People who took over these nodes of influence not because they cared about comics, but because they wanted to change comics and make sure that they alienate the comic book base that they've decided are very bad people. The people, the fans, was the reason they got into the industry, to get rid of people who they consider to be on the quote-unquote wrong side of history. So this has been a horrible, oppressed industry for decades and decades. It's been racist and sexist and especially misogynist all of this time. And there's been a phantom readership out there that is enlightened like we are, perfect like we are, all-knowing like we are. And they've been driven away from the comic shop, sometimes physically. Sometimes physically, Bubba just won't let you in. Just won't let Caden into the store. A fantasy, of course, a malicious fantasy that no basis whatsoever in reality. But these, I hesitate to call them creators because they don't create. They at most, innovatively desecrate. That's what they view as creativity. Take a character, race and gender swap it, and call yourself a creator. You didn't make the character. You didn't come up with the idea of race or gender swapping, and you're not doing a good job telling the stories of the race and gender swapped character, but you can still call yourself a creator because, hey, I work at Marvel and you don't. these creators got a hold of Marvel Comics. They infiltrated right from the top by either scaring the present management of Marvel Comics or driving them out, driving them out of the industry. And that left the Marvel Comics, wide open in their field. So all of a sudden, Thor was unworthy. A belching, beer-guzzling alcoholic who's only good for being a multiple amputee. We can cut pieces off him, but we can't have him be a hero. No way. Tony Stark's got to be an emasculated, gormless jerk. Let's get rid of as many of these characters as we can. We have Bruce Banner as the Hulk. Wouldn't it be better if we had an Asian Hulk? Wouldn't it be better if we had a teenage black afro-wearing Iron Man who's now an Ironheart? Wouldn't it be better if Thor were a woman? Wouldn't all these things be better? Wouldn't it be better if Hawkeye were a woman? Wouldn't it be better if just about everything, just about everybody were race or gender swapped or both? And as a result, for a long while there, years, you could look at your latest Marvel comics. You would find them in the shop because they didn't sell. You would find them in the shop, and it would be a very mannish Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. It would be Squirrel Girl or Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur or Ironheart. You would look long and hard in Marvel new releases for anything that you recognized. For any of the creative inheritances that these creators signed on to and then thought, well, I'll just destroy this. I mean, I'm getting $15,000 a year to do this. I'm making the big bucks. I'll just destroy this thing that I had no part in creating and that lots and lots of people like and that means a lot to a lot of people. I'll just destroy it because I'm on the right side of history. Anything I do is right ahead of time. I already know that ahead of time. So anything I do is right, and if you don't like it, you're a racist, a bigot, an Islamophobe, whatever. They did that. They were given a free rein to do that. And as a result, Marvel Comics went into the tank, just completely into the tank, and is still there. It is still in the tank. There is no Doctor Strange. There's Strange. She's a woman. The X-Men are probably the worst example. They are racist xenophobes. They are mutant superiorists. They are Magneto. They are the triumph of Magneto's dream of Homo superior reigning over humans and hating them and not interbreeding with them, separating from them. X-Men is probably the worst example. It's completely unrecognizable, but there are lots and lots of others. I'm sure you've seen them. If you've wandered anywhere near a comic shop, I'm sure that you've seen them. Where, well, we've got Captain America. Well, we should have a second Captain America, and he should be black. Well, we've got Captain Marvel. Well, we're going to call her the most popular comic book character in all time, in all history. She's not at all. She's demonstrably not. The minute she launches a #1 book, you can set your watch that it will be canceled in 6 issues for low sales. That's happened 15 times. No one likes this character, but you will still be told by Marvel executives she's the most powerful and most popular Marvel character of them all. Thor and the Avengers, the X-Men, you name it, right down the line. Marvel hasn't always wanted to tamper with Spider-Man. That's where you're touching the third rail. That's where you could really, really hurt your company. But they haven't seemed to mind hurting their company. So I don't know why they haven't made Peter Parker gay. They have all but made him gay in most of his comic book appearances. He still has, a wife or a girlfriend or whatever, but he's all but gay. And there have been vocal campaigns among these, again, I'll use the word creators. They're really just on Twitter. They barely do any work. The computer does the drawing. The writing is really, really bad. They mostly spend their time on Twitter. They've heavily campaigned for Peter Parker to be gay. And also for Steve Rogers, Captain America, to be gay, give Cap a boyfriend, etc., etc. And none of that is because they care. They don't care one way or another. They're not interested in comics. They don't read comics. They can't afford to read comics. They don't read comics at all. They're not comic book fans. They're only posing for social justice reasons, for SJW reasons. And as a result of that, as a result of these creatures being given complete control over comics that lots and lots of people liked, including myself, those people were driven away. Just plain driven away. They just stopped buying Marvel comics. No, sorry. I don't agree that Ben Grimm is a non-binary black lesbian. I don't agree that he is that. This characterization that I'm seeing for the Silver Surfer or Thor or Spider-Man, is not at all what I recognize. This isn't any variation of the character that I've loved for decades, longer than you've been alive. I have loved this character, and this isn't even a variation on that. This is a desecration of that. This is you jumping up and down to hate this character and its legacy. So I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to bail. I'm not going to buy Marvel Comics anymore. Marvel lost a huge number of fans to that. A huge number. And I know personally a huge number of those fans who've said, I don't care if they do everything right. Next year, next month, I don't care if they do everything right. I'm not going back. No, I'm done. I'm not going back to Marvel. A lot of those people migrated to DC Comics. But the writing was on the wall. I could tell, even when DC Comics was still relatively free of this infestation, I could tell that it was coming. What other thing would happen? And it did. It absolutely did. The most visible example of that, I don't think... A lot of the examples didn't make the splash in the news that the most famous example did. The number one thing, and by number one thing I mean only thing, that the DC creatives did was to make every one of their characters gay. And everyone that they could get away with. Again, there's a third rail. You don't touch Batman. And you don't touch Superman either. But in order to get around that, these SJW fake creators took Superman's young son, John, and aged him to a teenager, and then made him come out as stridently gay. In the comic, he comes out as bisexual. That's ridiculous. He is stridently gay. And they gave him floppy hair and, dewy eyes, and they set about the concerted, normal marketing campaign, which is, if you don't like this in any way, if you express any dislike about this at all, you are a homophobe. You are expressing, for some reason in public, after all this time of hiding it, you are expressing a lifelong bigotry, probably that your whole family has. In other words, these creatives were given freedom by their executives, by their editors, by their bosses, to level the deepest, most serious personal insult imaginable at the people who were paying the bills. And as a result of that, happening over and over and over again, most of DC Comics is also tanked. And shows no signs of changing. DC Comics is essentially Batman Comics now. These things are easily fixable. These are problems. First of all, the number one thing to say about these things, oh, you're calling me a problem? Oh, yikes. Oh, not a good look. This didn't age well. Read the room. I was this years old when I found out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the Twitter discourse, all the usual knee-jerk Twitter attacks. Nevertheless, there are ways to fix all of this. There are easy ways to fix all of this. We don't know what happened to John Kent when he was taken away from Earth as a boy and came back as a teenager. The easiest fix to that story is that the teenager who came back isn't John Kent. John Kent is still a boy. And so on and so forth, right down the line. There are easy fixes to all of this. DC hasn't shown any inclination to do that, and neither has Marvel. But in recent months, in the last year, there's been some indication that some of the money people at DC and Marvel, not the movies, but the people in charge of the comics division, there's been some indication that those people have realized that they don't have a readership anymore, that they're not making any money anymore. They're printing these comics at a net loss for every title, every time, right across the board. There are still diehard collectors out there, but there are no fans anymore. No one reads this. The social justice activists who will take to Twitter and personally insult anybody who doesn't want, I don't know, Beast Boy to be gay, don't read the comics. They don't buy them. They're not fans of them. They never have been. They couldn't tell you anything about the history of these characters. That is painfully obvious when you read some of the comics these people write. But they don't know what they're doing. They don't have any idea who the character is. I think there's been some indications that the money people involved in Marvel and DC have looked at that and thought, well, yeah, Ukraine flag in my Twitter bio, but I don't want to be losing money hand over fist every single quarter. I might lose my job. So maybe we should make comics that people like, instead of letting this cadre of blue-haired weirdos make comics that they think will change society into a version of themselves, because keep in mind, they're not learning anything. They're already perfect. What they really want to do is, can't you be more like me? Be better. Because I already have all the enlightened opinions about every social subject. I'm not ever doing anything wrong. You are, and that's why I adopt this curly-cued elementary school condescending tone of voice, because I know you're really just like a little kid who's bumping into things, and I just want to fix you. I think there's been an indication that money people have said, well, enough of that. let's start publishing stuff that makes money, stuff that people want to buy. And I wasn't really sure of that hypothesis, but I have to admit, the 2 comics that I got today seem to shore up that hypothesis. One is this. I got a variant cover. This was $11. That was a little bit of a shock at the counter to me. This is the Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Special. It's been 30 years since the death of Superman, the comic book in which Superman is killed by the creature Doomsday and seems to kill Doomsday himself. It had a number of different variant covers. There were a lot of variant covers at the shop today. And I got this one because I love it. This is... I love the elegant simplicity of this. That's a statue commemorating Superman, and that character right there is the gay Superman. That is Superman's gay teenage son. The teenage version of John Kent, who came back as a teenager instead of being a boy. The fact that Superman and Lois Lane were mother and father to a little boy, everybody loved that story. Everybody did. Gleason and Tomasi, everybody loved that era. That was the last great era of Superman. Everybody loved that incarnation of this character. They would have wanted it to go on for 10 years. If it hadn't fallen prey to this kind of social justice engineering, it would have gone on for 10 years because it did well. That's that character. And he's looking sort of affectionately at a statue of his father. I like it. I saw a whole bunch of variant covers of this, and that's the one I liked. But the issue surprised me. The issue is drawn by Dan Jurgens, who drew The Death of Superman, and it's really good. I'll get you a good panel. There we go. There we have Superman recounting the original appearance of Doomsday and the fact that he mopped the floor with what was then the Justice League, and then Superman had to fight him. I guess this raised Superman logo that's supposed to be raised off his chest. I'm gathering that is new. I haven't been reading Superman, so I don't know. That must be part of the character's return to Earth. That and these cuffs, they must be new details of the Superman costume. I'll have to check into that and see. But this is the story of what appears to be the return of Doomsday. It isn't the return of Doomsday. This character turns out to be something different, but it looks like it is the return of Doomsday. But the thing that interested me is that this is told as a retrospective. It has been years. It is the anniversary of Superman's alleged death at the hands of Doomsday inside the comic. Characters are reflecting on the fact that all those years ago, people were wearing black armbands to commemorate the death of Superman. And DC Comics, when they issued the comic book, The Death of Superman, they issued every copy of that comic in a plastic bag with a black armband. I had one. I still do. Somewhere I have my black Superman armband. And there's a kid in the class who's never heard of this story. And that kid isn't just anybody. That kid is John Kent, Superman's son. Superman and Lois Lane have a son, and he's a little boy. And there's no reference anywhere in here to the teenage Superman, the one that's on the cover. There's no reference anywhere in here to that. This takes place years after the death of Superman and the return of Superman. But we still, for one last moment, we get their son as a little boy. That's tremendous. That was really, really enjoyable. Right down to the end of the issue. I don't think I'll be giving anything away here. At the end of the issue, little John Kent says, Superman without a cape, well, that just ain't right. And his father corrects him and says, isn't. And that's the kind of attitude that was in those Tomasi and Gleason comics of Superman as a father. And then there are backup stories in here about how ancillary Superman characters from the 90s took his death. There's a story about the Kents. There's a story about a third-rate Captain America knockoff character called the Guardian it's written by Roger Stern, and it has artwork by Butch Guice. I did a double take there because the artist who drew Superman at the time was Jackson Guice. Butch was, I guess, a nickname. Now it's Butch Guice. And I just recovered from that little bit of disorientation when I got to another backup story, which is about Steel. It's about the character Steel, John Henry. And it has art by, it has writing by Louise Simpson. That's great. But it has art by John Bogdanove. And I once again did a little flashback because what happened to John Bogdanovich, who was a Superman artist at the time. It's the same person. It turns out they've just changed the names. Those backup stories were wonderful too. This was just a terrific issue. And then the other issue that I got was the first issue. This was $6. And it written and drawn by legends in the comic book world, so I naturally grabbed it. It's the first issue of what I guess is a miniseries. No number listed on the cover of how many issues it will be. It's called The Avengers War Across Time. And it is written by Paul Levitz, who I know for a long time as one of the great writers of the Legion of Superheroes, and it's drawn by Alan Davis, who's a fantastic artist. And you can tell it is intentionally retro. That is an old style cover design, logo design. And that's, this Thor does not have a beard. He's not wearing chainmail. He isn't a multiple amputee. You've got Iron Man in his old armor. You've got Captain America, who's just the leader of the team. He's not sorry about colonialism. He doesn't mention colonialism at all in the entire course of this issue. And it is very much set in the past. It's set right after Avengers number 11. But that's not the only thing that's retro about this issue. Even the credits. I don't know if you're going to be able to make this out. But it's the credits are given in the old style Stan Lee way. Written in respect by peerless Paul Levitz. Art in admiration by amazing Alan Davis. Compulsively chiefed by C.B. Cebulski. Stan Lee used to do that sort of thing. And he also, this footnote box at the bottom says, if you missed Avengers number 11, true believer, go find a copy now. Marvel used to do that. They used to assume that you were happy to read their comics. Once upon a time, Marvel Comics were not a scorched earth, utterly joyless, food-obsessed wasteland of Twitter identitarian politics. Once upon a time, Marvel Comics were not that. They are that now. But once upon a time, they were just fun. The readers went there for fun. And the Avengers have gotten over an adventure here, and they go their separate ways. But someone is not happy. And that someone is Kang the Conqueror, who is watching them from the future and determines to strike at them once again. We see he has all sorts of versions of Iron Man's armor. He has the remnants of Captain America's shield. He has an old fantasy car. He has Thor's hammer in a bubble. He has a whole bunch of technology that he's collected from the past. Interestingly, we are told in this issue for the first time why he wants to conquer the 20th century when he's in the 31st or the 32nd century. He mentions it himself. He says that he needs the fertility of the 20th century in terms of its crops in order to feed the troops that he's using to conquer the galaxy. We marched across the galaxy and all hail Kang the Conqueror, but too many worlds are barren wastelands. I must have old Earth as my granary in the decades after they have maximized yield and before they destroy themselves. That's interesting. That's never been given as a reason before. But when Kang has a predictable temper tantrum in his trophy room, he discovers the gamma-irradiated heart of the Incredible Hulk. It's not how hearts work, but he discovers the heart and uses it to create a Hulk menace. He figures the way I can destroy the Avengers is by the Hulk. I'll have the Hulk attack them. I'll have the Hulk go crazy. Now, keep in mind, in Marvel continuity back then, you were always on the hair's breadth of that happening anyway. You wouldn't have needed Kang to be involved and make some sort of evil Hulk. But that's what this issue is. This issue is the Hulk fighting the Avengers. And Thor is sidelined early on, and in a convenient way, in a natural seeming way, he is sidelined fairly early on. So the rest of the Avengers have to fight the Hulk, even though they are constantly saying in the issue that we have to find what happened to Thor because he's the only person who can go toe-to-toe with the Hulk and win. And the storyline is going to continue. They thwart Kang's plot in this issue, but there are going to be other plots. They decide that Kang is too dangerous not to take the fight directly to him. I think it's fascinating, and I loved it. I'm a bit of a student of Alan Davis's artwork, and you'll notice this is, well, you'll notice if you know his artwork, this is scratchier. It's more textured than usual, than his artwork usually is. I am very interested in this. I loved it. I loved the issue. And I'm very interested in where it goes from here. I will certainly collect these rather than wait for them to be assembled in a volume. But there's something, I don't know if you noticed it, there's something these two comics share in common. They don't share a publisher in common. One is DC and one is Marvel. But there's something they share in common. They are both retro. They are both what we could call retro. They are both setting a storyline in a world that the creators know the fans already like. The fans, except for blue-haired Twitter activists, no one likes gay teenage John Kent. Not because he's gay, but because he's a teenager. No one likes that. No one wants that to be true. No one wants this character to be called Superman. And likewise, in Marvel Comics, no one likes the relentless Twitter identity politics that has poisoned the entire lineup. No one likes that. No one wants it. No one buys it. And these issues are completely free of both of those. In one, we get a flashback story that involves a young John Kent and the real Superman, the real Superman, the real Lois Lane, the real world all around them. And in the other, we get the classic Avengers. Maybe that's the reason why I like them both so much. It was a good comic book day. We will see. I will see if my errands take me near the comic shop next week. So I might go, even if Michael and I do a video next week. I might still do another new comic book release video if I go. But anyway, that was my comic book foray today, and you got a bunch of editorializing. But that was my comic book foray today. 2 comics at the comic shop, and I enjoyed them both. That is rare enough to warrant a video. So I'll see you next Wednesday for whatever I talk about comic book-wise then. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.